Welcome to the Great Loop Radio Podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today we are featuring one of our very popular members right now, Robert Youens. Just completed the Great Loop solo at 71 years old on a John boat, and he did so in record time. So if you are anywhere on social media, you have heard this story, and we are going to bring you the details in an interview with Robert. Before we jump in, as always, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Kathy All. She is a certified financial planner with Edward Jones. Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with our sponsors recognized, I want to officially welcome Robert Youens to the Great Loop Radio Podcast. Robert, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Kim, thank you for having me on. Who would have known when I met you in Brewster, New York on the west side of Lake Oneida that, it would have blown up like this. And I'm so happy to meet you again on video.
Yep, it is so nice to meet you again. It was lovely to meet you in person at SK Yards. Um, let's dive into the story because it was a neat experience too to watch the oil change that happened, NASCAR style, pit row oil change on your boat while you were stopping there at Brewerton. But let's jump into the story. I think a lot of people know the story, but let's set the stage for those who maybe have not come across you. So we mentioned you did this on a John boat. We mentioned you did it in record time, but let's start from the beginning. How did you first learn about the Great Loop? And when was that?
Well, it's kind of been part of my life story. I've been around boating for my whole life. Started around 9 years old, and who didn't hang around boating and not know about the Great Loop? So I can't remember a time when I didn't know about the Great Loop.
Hmm. And so, what inspired you to take this on, and to do it in a very unique way by trying to break a speed record?
The desire to do it was probably much like every other Great Looper. I wanted to do it. The thought of doing it in a John boat probably had never crossed my mind. Until I had done several great adventures up in the Arctic with my John boat and Inside Passage, and I was looking around about just kind of hanging out in the Bahamas, man. Drinking rum and cokes and checking out all the islands, and
Hmm.
I stumbled on Red Flower's record that he set raising funds for pediatric cancer, which I think was so admirable. And I looked at it and I went, "Oh my God, I think this is possible." And the competitive juices in me started stirring, and there it was, John Boat, Great Loop, speed record.
Yep, put all the pieces together. But you mentioned real briefly that you had had other event adventures. For me, having been exposed to the Great Loop for a long time and being a Southerner like you, um, some of your other adventures on the John boat sound more challenging to me. The Inside Passage, the Arctic, and we'll let people kind of explore your background online since we don't have enough time to cover all that. But the Great Loop. Seems like it might be easier, although more miles certainly than those adventures, but you don't have the weather concerns, especially if you're doing it quick. But so you're experienced with using your John boat for some of these very interesting and different adventures. But tell us about the boat and whether, you made any modifications or outfitted it with any special equipment so that you could take on the Great Loop.
Well, during my Arctic expedition, I got caught in some sea ice and ended up having to jump ice, push ice out of the way. A big section of polar ice cap had dropped down in the Amundsen. So I had damaged my boat, and well-built boats reached out to me and said, "Oh man, we're so sorry you had a problem with the boat. So I wish we would have known." And so well-built contacted me and offered to sponsor me and build a boat that would handle almost anything that a person could endure. And they knew I was the person that would put it into almost anything a boat could endure. So I
Hmm.
had a lot of fun with Well Built. We built a boat with full Kilson, triple Kilsons in the bow. It's got ice skids over the keels, extra strong transom. And then I came up with a modification. You probably saw it's kind of a signature piece of my boat, the high rise bow. Because in the Arctic and but in the Inside Passage, I had situations in very steep seas where I would bury my bow and take a lot of water. And Quentin Clark, who became a strategist as part of the team, uh, uh, has been doing fabrication his whole life, and he said, "You mock it up in cardboard, and I'll build it." So that structure on the front of my boat was a really signature item when I got out in the Atlantic and got into some rough seas.
Hmm. But so the boat, 16 feet, is that correct?
16 feet. It does have a what's called a modified V. So it's got about a 9-degree v built into the stern, and the V advances as you progress forward.
Hmm. And you steered the entire thing with a tiller, is that correct?
Well, I had the great idea of because I knew I was going to have some fairly significant open water crossings to go at an autopilot, and any one of your members that's used to sailing know about tiller steer autopilots, and I adapted a Simrad TP22 autopilot to run my boat, and worked really good. If you saw that 400-mile Gulf crossing, man, it was straight because that autopilot was doing its job. Unfortunately, when I popped out in the Atlantic and got kind of pinned to the coast to some storms, I ran into some riprap, clonked with my motor pretty hard, and it broke my mount and took a lot of salt water. And I ended up scrapping the autopilot, I guess, after the second day.
Yeah.
So
So,
it was tiller steer, a lot
yeah,
of tiller steer.
it absolutely was. So, for anybody listening who follows the Great Loop and listens to our podcast, there's so many things we've already like touched upon that are very different about the way you did your loop. But let's talk about the stats just so we can kind of, go over how long did it take since you were looking for speed. Did you even calculate how many stops and how much fuel and things like that? Kind of the Great Loop by the numbers, if you will.
Well, I'm looking into an analysis of that. My
Hmm.
analysis somewhat messed up when I had that incident in South Carolina. I'm sure you're going to talk about that later. It always comes up. I damaged my Simrad chart plotter, and so I lost a lot of my data. And I pulled the chip, and I'm gonna have to pull that all back together. And I just started looking at that stuff yesterday, but I can give you a pretty good summation.
Okay. Hmm.
What particularly are you interested in?
Well, first of all, the time, because I know that was one of the things you were pushing for. You were looking, and all in fun, but you were looking to beat Red Flower's time on the Great Loop. So you did, in fact, do that. And what was your final time?
Well, let me set it straight. It's
Yeah.
Red's a great guy.
Hmm.
I told him I want to go for it, and he said anything that I can do to help you, you just let me know. And
Hmm.
talked to Steve Herndon and became very good friends with Peter Hages, who set the 12-day record. And yeah, there's no friction between us guys, and
Right.
so yeah, I just redirect me, Kim.
Yeah. Just what was your final time on
I
it?
was 13 hours. Excuse me, 13 days. Excuse me. I'll get there. 19 days, 13 hours, and 1 minute. So I think I got his record by maybe 6 hours.
Yeah, pretty amazing time. You referenced Peter there, who was also doing the Great Loop, overlapping the time that you were doing it. Very different style. He was in a 40-foot contender with a crew of four, and his final time was 12 days and some odd hours. So it's been an interesting summer with all of our speed
Oh,
record
we
people
got
out there.
Peter Frank and Solo Ventures, and I could just name a whole list of people that I was following, in addition to the traditional loopers, because I'm very interested at some time doing a traditional loop with my wife.
Yeah, and we definitely want to talk about that too. I feel like there's so much we could cover. You mentioned Peter Frank. He is, of course, the 20 or so year old. He might be 22-ish, you may know. But he is out there paddling the Great Loop for anybody who's not familiar with Peter Frank. He is doing it clockwise. Most of us in our power boats do it counterclockwise so that we don't have to deal with the river currents going against us. He is paddling against the rivers and has just reached the Mississippi, I believe. So one of the bigger challenges for Peter. But it was great. There were pictures, of course, of you and Peter meeting in a lock, which is pretty interesting to see. How did that, and we're going a little bit off the questions, but just so curious, how did that How did you manage to meet up with him, especially in a lock, since going in different directions, typically one would have exited when the next one was coming in, but we love those pictures of the two of you meeting in that lock on the Tensom.
Well, for over 25 years, I was an ultramarathon canoe racer. I raced all over the U.S. and I knew a lot of people in the canoe racing field, and Peter is out there doing this counterclockwise for a reason. He is very enamored and honoring of a couple of guys that did the 28,000-mile challenge, and I recognized his boat immediately,
Mm-hmm.
and so he is reenacting these veteran canoers trip and honoring it. That's why he's going backwards, because they
Yeah.
did it backwards. So no, he's a really cool guy. I had heard he was coming, and it just worked out. We immediately shook hands. We bonded over the fact that we've both been run over by a car. He had his spine broken, and I had my face crashed up pretty bad. But it's a weird. We knew the same people. I've solo canoed the Mississippi River, and so we had a lot of experience. But we had our own missions to take care of, and I
Yeah.
shook his hand. I headed south and he headed north.
Yeah. Certainly quite a moment when the two of your courses intersected there. So we've talked about the fact that you were solo in a John boat, but you had a support team. So tell us a little bit about who was behind the scenes and what the support team was that was helping you with this journey.
Yeah, well, no journey like this is truly solo. It's I was the guy in the boat, wiggling the tiller. But Jack Dunn has been with me. Well, I've been with him. He was part of an elite sailing team that I was invited to join, and we've done the Regatta de Amigos down from Galveston to Veracruz. I think Jack and I did that 3 times together, and I learned a lot working with different captains and stuff. So yeah, it was nice to have. He's also a certified Coast Guard captain and done transports up the East Coast, and he's done the Mac sailboat races. So not only was he a router, he was a strategist for the East Coast, the Great Lakes, and then we brought on Quentin Clark, who built my high-rise bow. He lives in St. Louis, and he became a strategist for the Illinois coming into Chicago. He's recently run that. He's run the entire Mississippi in his John boat, and has done runs up into Kentucky Lake and that stuff. So I was very fortunate to have a team of support that understood the route and knew me, and knew we had really good mind melds
Mm-hmm.
that worked out. And then the final person, part of the team, my wife Deborah Youens, she
Mm-hmm.
kept me grounded when I would, make boo boos and stuff. She would make sure I wasn't going to do that again. And we'll talk about that later.
And I love that. And I think Deborah is probably qualified for sainthood.
Just call that from time to time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So tell us though, you had two people you mentioned as strategists. What did they do for you? What is a strategist when you're trying to break a Great Loop speed record?
Well, the router and strategist overlapped in Jack. So the router's responsibility is to look at weather. I had a detailed spreadsheet of different routes, distances, and planned routes and alternate routes. And he would give me go no goes on weather conditions and stuff. Probably the biggest boo boo that stands out is when I left Cape Canaveral and headed right into a building tropical storm. He had given me a forecast before I went to bed the night before. I should have got up in the morning and contacted him and said, "Hey, is that weather window still open?" I made a mistake. I did not contact him that morning. The weather system was already building over the mainland, and if I would have contacted him that morning, I wouldn't have had that run in with big north winds, being out in the Gulf Stream, and having to make that change of course over to Jacksonville. So the router, I mean, God, look at the job he did for me in Lake Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
We got me going. He said, "Hey, do not go out to Lake Michigan that second day when I went over to Arcadia." And that was a great call because there's thunderstorms building in south of Lake Michigan. But I woke that morning. He says, "Hey, Robert, there's a possibility that weather window to get right down the throat of Lake Michigan is opening." He said, "Make that first 60 miles to the point." And I did. And I called him like I should have at Cape Canaveral. And I said, "Hey, is that weather window open?" And he said, "Oh my God, Robert, yeah, run it straight to Chicago." It was
Hmm.
200 miles running right down. Oh, it's so exciting.
That is
Um,
exciting. Lake Michigan and I
what,
are not friends. I've mentioned that
yeah,
before.
when you
I
get
get
when you get
seasick, and we even picked good days, and I still was not happy on Lake Michigan with
that was the
emotions.
router job, and since he knew the area, he knew he recommended where to camp that first night I was in Lake Michigan, a beautiful
Hmm.
little island with a elliptical cove. But he knew those areas. He was familiar with it. And same when I got into the that was the strategy side. And same when I got into the Illinois and Mississippi, Quentin actually came in his John boat and ran with me for a while.
Yeah. And that was neat to see. As your following grew, there were more and more boats out there running with you. There were a whole bunch of them following you in Brewerton when we saw you. But um, you mentioned, the routers and how that they were setting a strategy. Did they help you with speed limits, or, other places where you needed to stay in compliance with limitations? Like, how did you figure that out in places like the Erie Canal where there's speed limits?
Well, I am an intense researcher.
Hmm.
I always felt that I was good in sales because I knew the competition better than they did, and then I knew
Hmm.
my product inside and out. So I looked at this as a research opportunity. So I have thousands of followers. I put it out there to my followers on a John Boat forum. I said, "Hey, tell me about the Erie Canal." Like four guys that lived right on the Erie Canal came in and talked to me about speed limits on there and stuff, and kind of threw me a curveball about the speed limits are general recommendations, and the actual enforcement is based on the amplitude of wake and the potential damage done by wake. So I contacted the Canal Corporation,
Hmm.
talked to people at the Canal Corporation. I said, "Hey, I understand this thing about regulating boat speeds by the amplitude of their wake." And he goes, "Oh yeah, it's we had to put out a notice to mariners June 2nd, 2017, spelling it out because a 50-foot trawler going 8 miles an hour can put out a 4 foot wake, and we don't want that happening in a 10-mile-an-hour zone. So we put out a clarification statement that we want in 10-mile zones that there shouldn't be more than a 12-inch amplitude wave coming off the boat." And I said, "Can I get a copy of that?" So they sent me a copy of it, and I'm thoroughly concerned about that. So I called the New York Parks Group and asked to speak to the Marine Enforcement Division. I actually got to talk with an officer that does speed enforcement on the Erie Canal, and I said, "I'm really, really concerned. I want to work well with everyone on the Erie Canal. And I definitely want to follow the laws." It was shared to me about this amplitude thing, and like in 10-mile-an-hour zones, you shouldn't produce an amplitude of over 12 inches. He goes, "Yeah, Robert, what do you think I do enforcement on?" "I do enforcement on a Sea-Doo. We don't put out any wake when I'm going 25 miles an hour. So, yeah, I run the 10-mile-an-hour zones at 25." So, yeah, it was a lot of that. I maintained, really slow speeds through the fives. In fact,
Hmm.
I messed up on my spreadsheet and I had a 10-mile-an-hour zone labeled as a 5-mile-an-hour zone. Guess what? An employee of the Canal Corporation called me on the phone and said, "Robert, why are you doing 5 miles an hour in a 10-mile zone?" I said, "Oh, man, thank you so much. Who are you? Can you text me a copy proving that this is a 10-mile zone?" So, yeah, a member of the Canal Corporation sent me a photograph of the rules for that area. So, no, it's the deal is everyone should do the research. I don't care who you are, and you
Hmm.
should know the rules, and you should follow them. And so that's what I did, Kim.
Yeah, and I love that. AGLCA preaches that everyone should do the loop in a way that is meaningful to them and safe,
Mm-hmm.
um, and courteous. And it sounds like you did all the right things to make sure that you were staying in compliance with things like speed limits, which is so important.
Right.
And I appreciate that research you did because there were some things in there that you mentioned that I was not aware of. So that is super helpful.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll send you
let's,
a copy of that Notice to Mariners.
I would love that.
I
Thank
think
you.
it should be shared. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and play a message from one of our sponsors. When
Okay.
we come back, I want to kind of jump into the substantial social media following that you generated during this excursion. So we'll be back in a moment. While circumnavigating the loop and dropping into Georgian Bay, come meet some friendly faces at Hinson Marina in Penetanguishene Bay, Killbear Marina outside of Parry Sound, and finally at Wright's Marina in Bing Inlet, the last stop before the North Channel. These family-owned, one-stop, full-service marinas are strategically placed along the eastern shores of Georgian Bay. Each marina has fully licensed OEM and ABYC certified mobile technicians, 24/7 emergency services, laundry services, shuttle services, provisioning, internet, and heated storage options. Check out their article in the July 2024 Great Loop link. They await your arrival. The time has finally come. Make your reservations now at Navy Pier Marina. Starting summer 2025, enjoy daily and hourly transient dockage in the heart of Chicago. This marina offers flexible, short-term options, making it the perfect rendezvous spot for loopers and locals, charters, yacht and boating clubs, and more. Their 5-star accommodations include concierge services, on-site laundry, 24-hour safety surveillance, washrooms and shower facilities, and even allow pets. All boats up to 183 feet are welcome with no minimum size requirement. Visit the city for a day brimming with arts, culture, fine dining, and exclusive shopping at this legendary landmark on Lake Michigan. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. My guest today is Robert Youens. Many of you know him because he recently did the Great Loop solo on his 16-foot John boat. If you are on social media, I think you came across this story. I had people sending me links to this story in all different places. I have 3 children in their 20s who 2 of the 3 have nothing to do with the Great Loop and wouldn't automatically be served content on the Great Loop. And they were sending me, Mom, I just saw this guy on TikTok and he's doing the Great Loop on a John boat. And I was like, yeah, that's Robert. He's a member. Um, but so, and even right now, we're up here in Canada on the boat. We've got a big AGLCA logo on the side of the boat. And we hear people walking by and chatting, did you know somebody just did that in a John boat in about 3 weeks? And I just sit there and kind of giggle to myself. Your story got a
Thank
lot
you.
of reach.
Yeah.
So why do you think that it resonated with so many people?
I don't know. I'm still kind of clueless. I can tell you when Jack and Quentin and Deborah and I wrote the game plan and everything that we expected to encounter, dealing with tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people on social media was not part of our list. So we
Hmm.
were as astounded as anyone. And I guess it started when I went into the Okeechobee Waterway and the lockmaster said, what are you doing with all those fuel tanks? And I said, well, I'm going to do the Great Loop. She says, you got some ice in there in a cooler? I'll pass you a popsicle. And I said, man, that'd be awesome. But no, I don't keep ice. I'm trying to keep it white. And she said, well, I'll call up ahead to all the locks to make sure that they know you're coming. And this sounds so cool. I'm going to tell all my friends about it. I was like, why? What's the interest? And I posed that to my followers on Facebook, or I hate to say my followers, but to the group on Facebook, and I got
Hmm.
some really cool answers. Let me reflect on that with some answers that they gave.
Please, yeah.
Um, Mr. Ewens, honestly, we took interest because you're a living legend. You have attributes that John, I won't get into what he said the attributes were, that we don't understand how fit in your John boat. We know you make many of our dreams come true. You're a daredevil. You're an adventurer. It's badass to see. I hope to be as cool as you are when I'm your age. It's like, yeah, this stuff's so weird because you're an inspiration and light for many people who can't experience what you do. Many have never ever thought of taking a vacation, much less getting out there and experiencing the joy that you experienced. We live vicariously through you. We had the adventure we all wished we could have. You took us along for the ride. People love a story. man versus nature and the story of community. The man in the arena, of course, we loved it. There's something about a man running a race, dashing across the water while people shout, "Go, Robert, go!" It's just immediately captivating. And the answers are everything from very personal things to another cancer survivor that was in his bed, and it was a way for him to experience the joy, even though he couldn't get to the shoreline. And everyone that contacted me that was experiencing cancer, recovery from cancer, were in the hospital. I contacted every one of those people personally, and one of them actually drove 500 miles to the finish line, and it was it was very special.
Yeah,
So
you
it just connected. I don't know, didn't quite.
I, yeah, I mean, you inspired so many. I mean, I saw you called a national hero, an inspiration. Um, we saw, certainly people sharing posts everywhere, um, seemingly unsolicited. There are people who are sharing your every move. Um, you know, I love that you are, so genuine and you just kind of don't understand it either. But you really did move a lot of people, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on the podcast. Um, the average time it takes loopers to complete the route, roughly a year. That number seems to grow for most people. They think they'll take a year and then they expand it to 2 years so that they can see as much as they can along the way, the towns, the people, all of the sites. Do you feel like you missed something by doing it at the speed you did it?
Yeah, absolutely. I missed a lot.
Hmm.
I was passing museums I wanted to go to. Jack, one of your New York American Great Loop Cruises Association. I don't know what you call them, sponsors
One
or
of our harbor hosts, yeah. Well, and his marina is also a sponsor, yeah.
he he was a friend,
Hmm.
and though I met his wife. I would have loved to have gone out with him and go
Hmm.
explore the old channel and stuff. So yeah, I missed a lot, but in there was a part of it that was uh that made up for that. Who gets to share their trip with millions of people?
Hmm.
I did. I had 59 million unique views on my Facebook, and so that made up for some of the differences. So did I miss what the average viewer did? Yeah, but I got paid back many, many times over, and I thought about that I missed what the average guy does, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to be at the fall rendezvous down there in Alabama this year, and I'm going to go do the trawler crawl and with my wife, and we're going to start looking at the perfect boat for us. So uh, I understand maybe not exactly what you're experiencing right now in your little micro loop,
Hmm.
but I do appreciate it, even though I don't understand it, and I hope to understand it. So yeah, guys, I don't want to stomp on your ground. I'm just one of a jillion boats out there. I just saw an opportunity that turned into something pretty magical, and I hope that you can share that joy with me.
Yeah, I love that. And you really, I've seen that you brought a lot of joy to people. And I saw that when you crossed their wake, you talked about that. So you did cover a little bit in that last answer how your journey was different than kind of an average loop or whatever average is these days. Any other ways that your journey was different than the average looper? Um, and how do you think it was similar also?
Well, I think like every looper, we fall in love with the loop in so many different ways, whether it's
Hmm.
watching YouTube videos or reading about the history of the Erie Canal or experiencing eagles that we have known that have done the loop and followed their YouTube series and stuff. I did all of that. And
Hmm.
I watched probably 40 videos just on the Okeechobee Waterway, so yeah, I fell in love with the idea, just like we all do. And then, I did my research and tried to understand all the different waters, like we discussed with the challenges of each area, whether they be sea conditions, inside passages, or speed limits. So, yeah, I think there was probably way more in common between my loop and the average looper than there were differences.
Yeah. Well, and talking with you and hearing how much research you did and how well prepared, I think the perception by some loopers when they hear about somebody doing a speed record is that they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, and that certainly isn't the case with all the preparation you did. So I think that's another similarity with a lot of people who spend a lot of time preparing for the loop. Obviously, you did your research and were very well prepared for your undertaking. I also think the people that followed you along the way. As I said, we were in Brewerton when you were coming by, and there was a whole fleet of John boats and small, like day boats, following you into the canal there and up into through Brewerton. Um, most of our gold loopers who finish their route come back and say it was the people that was really the best part of the journey. And I think that was the same for you too, because you had probably more people than most of us meet, even though we meet a lot of people and loopers out here and a lot of locals. I think you had that experience
I
times
was
10.
I was embraced. I was cared for. I remember as I was approaching Lake Oneida, a guy pulled up in a jet ski and he says, "Robert, this is can be a shallow, scary pass through Oneida. I'm going to show you all the shortcuts." Man, that guy got out in front of me. He ran me up the, I guess, to be the north or east side of the lake and through areas you'd never take a boat. But he zoomed me up there in the calm water and brought me on a calm water passage right there to meet you and the mechanics and the owner of the club there, and it was such a magic moment. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love the embrace of people, and I don't know if you knew this, but a legislator gave me like a 200-year pin for the
For,
loop,
for the
and
Erie Canal's 200th. Yep,
yeah,
one of the New York State legislators met you
yeah,
out there. Yeah, I did
it
hear
was
that.
it was
Very
amazing.
cool. It's
Yeah.
also neat to hear you explain because that personal watercraft was still with you when you got to Brewerton. But of course, Lake Oneida is just before Brewerton for those who aren't intimately familiar with the route. But so we were watching you on your inReach, and and it wasn't the best day on that lake. It was a bit
No,
windy, and
well,
most loopers come straight across. And we saw you head for the North Shore and went, I hope everything's okay. I hope he's not going towards the North Shore because there's a marina or something there and he needs something. Um, and you worked your way to Brewerton, and it's neat to hear you say that it was because a local with a short, a shallow draft boat like yours, kind of showed you the way through. So that's pretty cool, and that's the kind of help that all loopers rely upon and get when they need it along the way. So that's really neat to hear. As I said earlier, AGLCA preaches that, make this journey your own. Everybody's loop is different, regardless of if you do it in a quote unquote traditional way or do it in this way. But the one thing we really push is making sure you're staying safe. So you mentioned this earlier on. Uh-oh. You had a little bit of an unfortunate incident. So tell us about that and, give us anything you learned from that will help others stay safe as they take on the journey.
well, never get too confident. Never think you know it all.
Mm,
I had taken a lot of long trips in my John boat. I had never pushed it in my John boat. I've sailed on a lot of cruise. I've worked on commercial boats, and the axiom of safety is always to keep two people at the helm.
hmm
Keep anyone from falling asleep. I didn't have that option, but I should have been getting better rest. I know you're talking about the incident in South Carolina where I fell asleep at the tiller and I put my boat 45 feet into the woods. I looked at that today. Man, was it a barren area? It was super beautiful. I was, daydreaming about the universe, and I just fell asleep. And
hmm
next thing I knew, I woke up in the front of my boat. I looked around. I could barely see the water. It was so far through the brush behind my boat. And I immediately said, "Okay, is everything okay with my boat?" Wasn't thinking about me because I wasn't feeling anything. And surveyed the boat. My chart plotter had been totally damaged, and It was destroyed, and I don't know if it was my elbow or my searchlight went into it. I was back in my boat was 45 feet from the shore. I got out and I kind of walked around it. I was perched on top of reeds about 2 feet above the kind of a swampy area. Realized my boat had, I walked out to the water, realized my boat had jumped about a 2 foot mud cliff, and then hopped another foot to launch my boat into the woods. And so now's the time to just fess up. You make a
Hmm.
mistake, you just fess up. I didn't have any phone reception, so I had to send it via text on my inReach. And um, I said, "Hey, I fell asleep. I ran my boat onto the shore, and it appears that it's not damaged, and I should be able to go on." And oh man, my wife panicked. I can, the crew is upset, and so I kind of wandered around the area with my cell phone, and I found an area where I could call, and immediately called my wife first and said, "Honey, I'm okay." And I think I'm going to be able to go forward with this. And she the Saint Deborah just disappeared. It was stern Deborah. Robert, if you want to go on, what are you going to do that this never happens again? And I said, I made a mistake. I'm too tired. I'm going to get more rest. I promise to try to get 7 hours sleep a night from this point on. There may be nights I can't, but that's going to be my goal. And then I promise that I'm going to live on body fat and Red Bull during the day. No more meals after breakfast because the afternoons when I tend to get tired. So
Hmm.
I did. I lived on Red Bull and body fat from that point on. No noon meals, and I called the team and I said, hey, I ran aground. They said, you really want to tell the world that you fell asleep at the helm and, you made this huge gaffe, an embarrassing error. And I said, man, there's nothing embarrassing about adventure. Yeah, you're going to have mistakes. We're all only human. We can only prepare for that much. And I will share it with the world. I'll share with it immediately. I hope no one else makes this mistake. So if you're in your trawler looping around and you see a weather window, you hadn't gotten a lot of sleep, but you really think you need to go, don't eat a big old sandwich during the middle of the day. Drink a couple of Cokes for some coffee and push through it, but have someone beside you at the helm.
Hmm.
So the best thing that can come out of this, Kim, I'm looking you in the eye, is
Hmm.
that uh, yeah, no one else has this mistake. And what happened at that point, I shut that door behind me. I turned my focus to the path in front of me, never thought of it again.
Yeah. Well, and it's I think you gained a lot of respect and a lot of followers just because you fessed up to it. No excuses, it was a
I
mistake.
messed up.
And I love your wife's demand that you tell her how it was not going to happen again, because that's always, what I've always learned from my mistakes is after you fess up to it, you then look at how to prevent it from happening again. That's the next step.
Yeah.
And
And,
that's what you
and
did.
every great looper, I'm a member of your organization. I
Yeah.
apologize. I really, really apologize for messing that up. And no excuses. But if you make a mistake, fess up, change your ways, and share it with others so we can learn.
Yeah. Well, and most of us have made mistakes, whether it's a navigational error, something has happened that has caused a problem. That's a
Right.
mistake. Mistakes are generally unintended, and it's happened to all of us if you're cruising 6,000 miles. So,
Right.
most of us have the luxury of getting enough sleep every night because of the style that we're doing it. So it's not necessarily the same mistake that you had, but there's mistakes out there. And
Kim,
also,
let's
yeah,
close that book and
let's
move
close the
on to
book.
the interview.
Let's do it. So now that you've had this great experience, what would you tell someone who's just now kind of learning about the Great Loop? Because there are many people who had not heard of the Great Loop before and were inspired by your journey. So what would you tell them if they're thinking, maybe I'll give this a try myself. Robert has inspired me.
Well, I've shared this because I see people coming out of the woods with, they're going to do it in a pontoon boat that's ill-equipped for the journey and other things. And I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I've traveled over 20,000 miles on commercial vessels and pleasure craft crossing oceans. I run my John boat to the Arctic, and I only got to run my John boat to the Arctic because I earned the right. I had to ask Canada for permission to take a boat into the Northwest Passage, and it wasn't because I had a great John boat. It was because I could share my certifications, my Coast Guard certifications, my training, and my logs of my experience. So if you're thinking about doing this, I'll look you right in the eye. Earn the right to do this and earn the right to do it safely and do it in a way that you'll have a great trip. So, it starts with going to the local junior college or attending Coast Guard auxiliary meetings and learn how to navigate. Take some repair courses at the junior college and know how to repair a motor. Maybe take some plumbing courses at Home Depot because, yeah, but plumbing problems occur in your boat.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot to learn about boating, navigation. Then maybe buy a little sailboat or a little runabout and go run out into the intercoastal. And after taking your NASBLA certification class, and look at all those navigation buoys. Is this something I want to do with? And after you've done some level of earning the right to take on something as incredible as this, then go to a American Great Loop Cruisers Association rendezvous, go do a trawler crawl and explore, talk to eagles, talk to Kim if you get a chance. And yeah, I don't take any of this lightly, and no one that's considering should take it lightly, and their experience is going to be much better for proper preparation.
Yeah, I so appreciate that answer, Robert, because as I said earlier, I think there's this impression among, the slower looper crowd that when somebody's trying to break a speed record, they're just showboating and haven't done the pre-planning and had the experience. So I'm really glad that you take that approach to tell people who are considering doing it in a way that would be unsafe, that they really need to kind of earn that. I love the way you phrased
every
that.
every looper should understand how their craft works and the electronics, and maybe learn how to use a voltometer and that kind of
Yep.
stuff because things break.
They certainly do. So you've done the Great Loop, you've done the Arctic Circle, the Northwest Passage. What is next for you?
um I don't know. There's, we've already talked about my wife and I looking at a trawler and maybe getting that started pretty quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm still compelled to get out onto the Bahamas. I did a lot of research and prep for that, maybe through December or January when I changed the trip. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got all that research done to go knock around the Bahamas, do some spearfishing, and have that trip. But there is this idea that's been pitched to me
Mm-hmm.
that a sub 11-day loop is possible. I
Wow.
had a talk with I'm not going to tell you anything about the team, but it would be a 3-man team and the correct boat for doing this. And yeah, sub 11 days is possible. And we'll make a decision probably by December if this is going to become a reality. I asked that team, I said, where are we all? And I said, are we on a 10 scale? 4, 5, pipe dream? And everyone said they're at 6 to 7, 7 to 8. So this is maybe a possibility. I don't know. I don't feel the need to accomplish it, but why not? That's the name of Mike Straub's book, the guy that did on the CD, Why
Yeah.
Wait?
Yep.
And so I read Mike Straub's book, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
why wait?
Yeah, Mike's been on the podcast too. We enjoyed having him
Oh,
here.
cool.
So you talked about doing the loop perhaps for another record, and you talked also about a trawler. Those are two very different things. But do you think you would ever do the Great Loop on that trawler?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it may be a modified loop, and I think every loop is modified. But yeah, my wife has areas that she has great interest in. She has friends in Canada, so yeah, we may have our friends from Canada ride through the Trent Severn, or maybe run up to Montreal or something. And yeah, she's very interested in the Erie Canal. And then I have other friends that are, adventurous friends that would maybe like, the jumping in the New York Harbor or
Mm-hmm.
the Gulf Crossing or something like that. So, yeah, I might make it a family affair, and different family members and friends run different sections of the loop, in the boat that Deborah and I purchased.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Well, Robert, congratulations to you. Thank you for teaching so many people about the Great Loop, and thanks for being a promoter of the safety and the preparation that requires. I think it's a great story, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person again and meeting Deborah at the fall rendezvous.
I am looking forward to it, and thanks so much for spending the time with me today, and it's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And to everyone who's watched or listened today, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.